There is a stranger come, a man of charm and spell, from Lydian seas, a head all gold and cloudy fragrances. He has long blonde hair, a wine-red cheek, and eyes that hold the light of the very Hesperian. Day and lifelong night he haunts amid the damsels. He's always with these women, ere each lip dangling his cup of joyance. He says it this way: let me grip him once, but once within these walls, right swift that wand shall cease its music, and that drift of tossing curls lie still, when my rude sword falls between neck and trunk. Now, you can figure this out pretty quickly. Pentheus says, just let me get my hands on this guy that's creating all these problems, this dancing, this singing, this drunkenness, these orgies. I'm not going to allow any of this kind of insanity. The minute I get a hold of this guy, I'm going to jack him. End of discussion. I'm going to cut his head off, and we're going to solve this problem now. If you're familiar with any movies that come to mind, where, for example, certain kinds of things that kids like to do are somehow being disallowed. I mean, one student once said, dude, this is just like that movie Footloose, where they don't let them dance in the town, and it creates all kinds of problems. This is the essence of what we got going on here. That is to say, Pentheus is the representative of the conservative, the old, the traditional, and obviously Dionysius has brought into his town the new cult, the crazy, right? This, he says, 'tis all his word, this tale of Dionysius, how that same babe that was blasted by the lightning flame with his dead mother, for that mother's lie was reconceived, born perfect from the thigh of Zeus, and now is God. What call ye these? Dreams, jibes of the unknown wanderer, blasphemies that crave the very gibbet. In other words, he says it very simply. He says, this whole thing is a contrivance. It's all made up. The religion of Dionysius is a contrivance, and it is not legitimate. That's what's being spoken by Pentheus right away. And then he says, stay! Here's another marvel. See I not in motley fawn skins robed the vision seer, Tiresias? And my mother's father here, oh, depth of scorn, adorning with the wand of Bacchus? Father, nay, mine eyes are fond, it is not your white heads so fancy flown. It cannot be. Cast off thy ivy crown, or my own mother, sire. Set free that hand that cowers about its staff. So in other words, when Tiresias and Cadmus come on stage, Pentheus cannot believe it. He is, if you will, let's put it in our notes this way, he is the skeptic, right? Now, let's remind ourselves that 5 years after this play is performed on stage, it will be Socrates, the great philosopher, who has to defend himself against two charges. One, he doesn't believe in the gods. That is to say, he's an atheist. Two, he, of course, is ruining or corrupting the youth of Athens. So you can see how these two play, or how I say two plays, obviously the drama of Socrates' death and the Apology has an overlay just a few years prior when this play was performed on stage. Pentheus is going to be the skeptic. He is the voice of doubt, and let's put it in our notes, by the end of this play, he will be jacked, and jacked in the most horrific of ways. Okay? A caution is given. First by Tiresias. Tiresias will say, hey, listen, you better appreciate what's going down here. He says, let me tell you why Dionysius is important. He found the liquid shower hid in the grape wine. He rests men's spirits dim from grieving when the vine exalteth him. In other words, when he needs to, a person can get drunk with wine. He, Dionysius, giveth sleep to sink the fretful day in cool forgetting. There's going to be some interesting forgetting that will happen in this play, especially at the end of the play, and tragically it will happen with both Pentheus as well as his mother Agave. We'll get there. Is there any way with man's sore heart, save only to forget? In other words, Tiresias says, hey, listen, first of all, Dionysius has done something important. He's given us wine. And wine is an important thing because it allows for us to forget all about our suffering and our misery. And of course, all of these plays, you'll remember, they like that word woe, don't they? We've said before, right? Besides that, the prophet, the blind prophet, Tiresias, we've said more about Tiresias and his origination elsewhere, so you can go back and watch those lectures to hear that information. But Tiresias is a prophet who knows the future, and yet look what he says about Dionysius. He says, a prophet is Dionysius likewise. Prophecy cleaves to all frenzy, but beyond all else, to frenzy of prayer. Then in us verily dwells the God himself, and speaks the thing to be. Now this is static mystery cult stuff, the idea of mysticism, if you will. Tiresias says, I can't completely explain it. Later we're going to use the term translinguistic. When Pentheus asks Dionysius, explain it to me in words, Pentheus will hear Dionysius say, I can't explain it to you in words. And this is kind of what Tiresias is referencing. In other words, he says, this religion of Dionysius, we've got to respect it because he can tell you the future. Of course, the dark irony is Tiresias will tell, or Dionysius will tell the future to Pentheus, and it won't work well. He says, list and understand, King Pentheus, dream not thou that force is power, nor if thou hast a thought, that thought sore and sick, or dream not thought is wisdom. Up, receive this god to Thebes, pour forth the cup of sacrifice, and pray, and wreathe thy brow. Well, I mean, this is shocking stuff for Tiresias to be saying. And finally, he says it this way, our hairs are white, yet shall that dance be trod. We're old, but we're still going to dance. I will not lift mine arm to war with God for thee, nor all thy words. Madness most fell is on thee, madness wrought by some dread spell, but not by spell nor witchcraft to be cured. In other words, he says, you have the curse of skepticism. You don't believe, and because you don't believe, something terrible is about to happen to you. Cadmus, the grandfather, will say the same thing. Oh, beware, and let me wreathe thy temple, make thy prayer with us, and walk thee humbly in God's sight. Now, we've heard this a lot in these plays, this notion. And to remind, these plays were not performed for entertainment. Although there was contest and although they did entertain, the plays were performed as religious ceremony. And here we'll hear it again. You better show proper humility towards the gods and religion. And in fact, Cadmus tries to put onto the head of Pentheus a wreath, and Pentheus will have none of it. Tiresias will come back one more time to say of Pentheus, hard heart, how little dost thou know what seed thou sowest? Blind before, and now indeed most mad. Now note the ironies here, right? Tiresias, who is blind, can see, and he understands. You better appreciate this new religion that is descending on Thebes, because this Dionysius, he's a real god, and if you don't show him proper obeisance, you will be jacked. Cadmus is going to suggest, probably the same. Ironically, Cadmus's grandson, Pentheus, at the end of this play, will have learned all too late that, in fact, exactly what Tiresias is saying here is true. Now, this is our first challenge of the interpretation of this play, so let's put it in our notes. This is one of those really difficult questions about this play. Is it for real? Is Euripides for real? How do you interpret this play? For example, disbelief, this seems to suggest, is no laughing matter. But our question is Euripides serious, or is he making fun, for people who kind of believe in these stories about God sleeping with virgins and being produced as sons of God and all of that, and, the craziness of this play. This will be the first introduction of this question. Interestingly, if you are on the side that says Euripides is dead serious about this and he is saying you better show proper respects to the gods, one good argument is that he elicits Tiresias, who in all the other plays is this really somber, sober kind of personage. I mean, can you imagine Sophocles' Tiresias behaving and talking like this? They start dancing, they get younger as they dance, that is to say, they start to feel that they're not as old as they were and all of that. Well, the scene will end, and the Bacchae first choral lyric will come on stage, And they will predict that Pentheus will in fact get jacked as the protagonist of the play, maybe, right? And the prophecy is all men like Pentheus, that is to say skeptics, in the end, they all get jacked. We think of Socrates being forced to drink his hemlock here, don't we, right? Now we're going to have a series of conversations throughout this play between Pentheus and Dionysius. You could argue that this play easily subsumes down to a couple or three really important dialogues between Pentheus, the king of Thebes, and the god Dionysius. The first of several of these conversations where the audience is going to be forced to have to watch what they inevitably know is coming. Let's go ahead and just put it in our notes. Pentheus is going to be jacked by the end of this play. Dionysius is going to make sure that it happens. However, Dionysius is a strange and interesting god in this play. In the early part of the play, he's gentle, he's kind, he is not violent at all. I mean, when the soldier who begins this scene will tell us, when I came to arrest him, he literally just put his hands out and smiled at me like, no worries. Reminding us maybe, for example, of Christ in Gethsemane when he's being arrested, right? But later in this play, Dionysius will be anything but sweet. He will be a raging bull, literally, as a bull, and he will be the instigator of a terrible, terrible thing that will happen to Pentheus and to Agave, his mother, at the end of the play, and to all of Thebes, we might say. The first thing the soldier says is, all those women that we arrested and put in the dungeon, they're gone. They've escaped. Their shackles fell off like magic. There was this, they just walked out. We think immediately of the prison doors flying open for Paul and Silas in the story in Acts 16:26, right? We have a similar story going on here. In other words, the soldier says, I don't know how this happened, right? Pentheus then is ready to have his first exchange with the god. Now, let's point out for your notes, Pentheus doesn't know this is Dionysus. He thinks that it's a messenger from the east bearing the message, if you will, a missionary, if you will, of the god Dionysius. His first comments, though, are fascinating ones. Very first thing he does is makes fun of the way that Dionysius looks. Handsome, young, long blonde curls, a very effeminate face. Listen to how he says it. Mary, he says, a fair shape for a woman's eye, sir stranger, and thou seekest no more, I guess. Long curls withal, that shows that thou ne'er hast been a wrestler. Remember that Euripides was trained as an athlete. Here we have that distinction between the jock, the wrestler, and the artist type, the actor type, the effeminate type. And he's making these distinctions here, right? Both down both cheeks so softly tossed and winsome long hair, and a white skin. It hath cost thee pains to please thy damsels with this white and red of cheeks that never face the light. In other words, all you do is sleep with all these women in the night and get them drunk. Of course, you already kind of get the sense. Pentheus is going to go right at Dionysius, and Dionysius is going to respond through a series of questions. There is this kind of question back and forth. Some people have pointed out the similarities between this exchange and the exchange between Christ and Pilate at the end of Christ's life. When he's asked, where you come from, Dionysius says, I come from Lydia, present-day Turkey, right? He says, I've been sent to Thebes to bring the religion of Dionysius, right? He says, it started in Asia. Let's point out, that is the foreign to the Greeks that are watching this play. And, of course, this is a question. Is Euripides saying that the worship of Dionysius is actually not Greek at all? It's actually foreign and it should be jettisoned? Or is he saying we should embrace things that are foreign, like the worship of Dionysius? When asked about what's going on with this, Pentheus says, and what good bring they to the worshiper, these mystery rites on all of this? Dionysius says, good beyond price, but not for thee to hear. In other words, he says, I can't explain to you what we will call in theological terms translinguistic, beyond language. I can't explain it to you. You have to experience the religion for yourself. Pentheus calls him a trickster. Thou wouldst prick me on the more to seek them out. In other words, oh, you're trying to get information out of me so you can find more women to seduce, right? Dionysius will say his mysteries abhor the touch of sin lovers. In other words, he says the mysteries of Dionysius, they're not interested in the sinful actions. And Pentheus will come back and say, and so thine eyes saw this god plain. What guise had he? In other words, oh, so you've seen this god? What does he look like? This is significant because later in the play, Pentheus himself will get to see what Dionysius actually looks like, and it's not a pleasant thing. Dionysius will say what guise it liked him. In other words, he can take any shape that he wants. And then Pentheus will ask, it will say, you're not able to answer me. Dionysius will say something fascinating. He says, wise words being brought to blinded eyes will seem as things of naught. Now, for those of us that have studied our Plato's Republic, we know this is Book 7, the cave allegory, outright, isn't it? The idea, in other words, is, he says, when you're blind, you cannot appreciate the things that I'm saying right now. I'm telling you things, but you're too stupid to understand them because you're blind. Dionysius will continue. Most oft, he says, we enjoy our ceremonies by night. 'Tis a majestic thing, the darkness. And Pentheus says, yeah, right, with women worshiping, right, 'tis craft and rottenness. I know what you guys do at night, in other words. Dionysius says, by day no less, whoso will seek may find unholiness. In other words, you don't have to be unholy at night. You can be unholy during the day. Pentheus will say, enough. Thy doom is fixed. For false pretense, corrupting thieves. Again, sounding very much like Miletus's accusation against Socrates in Plato's classic Apology. Right? Dionysius says, not mine, but thine. For dense blindness of heart and for blaspheming God. Dionysius says, you're going to get jacked. Pentheus says, a ready knave it is and a brazen brow, this mystery priest. Now, of course, if you're Greek and you're there for the Dionysian festival in 405, and you're sitting there and you're listening and watching Pentheus say this about Dionysius, you immediately are like, whoa, 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 dude, you are going way too far to say what you're saying about the god Dionysius to the god. Obviously, Pentheus doesn't realize that's who he's speaking to, right? Pentheus will, in fact, however, not be done. The next thing that he does is even more extreme. He cuts off the delicate curls that dangle off of Dionysius's head. Dionysius will say, I have vowed it to my God, 'tis holy hair. We think of the story of Samson in the book of Judges, don't we, right? In the Bible. The same notion here. Pentheus cuts off Dionysius's hair. Let's point out that later this is going to be a symbol because Pentheus himself will put on a wig to dress like a woman, to dress like Dionysius, so that he can then go and witness the Bacchaean rites on the mountain. We'll get to that one later. The final words of the exchange will remind, obviously, Christian readers of the exchange between Christ and Pilate. Dionysius will say, my Lord, if you tie me up, God will unloose me when I speak the word. Pentheus will say, he may, if ere again amid his bands of saints he hears thy voice. And Dionysius will say, even now he stands close here and sees all that I suffer. God, Zeus, is right here watching what's going on. Pentheus will say, oh, really? Where is he? Where is Zeus? For mine eyes discern him not. I can't see Zeus anywhere. Dionysius says, well, the god, and Dionysius is suggesting that the god Dionysius is where I am. 'Tis thine own impurity that veils him from thee. In other words, let's put it in our notes. For those who read this play as Euripides is basically making fun of people who believe in these kinds of silly myths, it's awfully hard to understand then some of these lines as not being serious for Euripides. Euripides, Dionysius says, you should be able to see the god, but you can't because you're blinded by skepticism and irreverence. In other words, you've become a modern and you no longer believe in the gods. Now remember, this is the last of the great plays. It comes at the very close of what we call the classic era of Greek classical culture and Athenian theater. And it's very possible that Euripides saw it coming, the skepticism that would inevitably take Athens down, the inability to believe in the gods, if you will. Pentheus says, the dog jeers at me and Thebes, bind him. And the soldiers begin to bind him. And Dionysius says, I charge you, bind me not, I having vision, and you blind. So the whole notion of vision versus blindness is huge in this play, and obviously a powerful symbol. Pentheus says, I will, and better yet, bind even tighter. To which Dionysius says, thou knowest not what end thou seekest, nor what deed thou doest, nor what man thou art. Now, a couple of really, obviously, yes, obviously the forgive them, the words of Christ from the cross, forgive them for they know not what they do, immediately obviously comes to mind here, no question. But notice he says, you don't know what man you are. Now, we're going to come to this at the very end of our conversation, that at the Delphi oracle on the wall there was that famous oracle that, of course, is a very Socratic one, know thyself. In other words, Dionysius is saying to Pentheus, you don't know who you are. Dionysius will continue, so, all right, if you're gonna do this, so let it be. A name forewritten to calamity. In other words, you, Pentheus, will be a walking model. You will serve as an example to everyone about what it means if you don't reverence the gods. Dionysius will say, I go, for that which may not be, I may not suffer. Yet for this thy sin, lo, he whom thou deniest cometh after thee for recompense. Euripides seems to be suggesting through the voice of Dionysius, you can disbelieve in the god Dionysius, but just watch what happens. There will be payback, if you will. That is to say, there will be some violence that will be coming. Off they go, and the second choral, the Bacchae second choral lyric happens. They call on Dionysius to punish Pentheus and to punish Thebes. Then we have Dionysius' voice. There's an earthquake and lightning, and Dionysius will appear, reminding us of the voice out of the whirlwind, maybe, from the book of Job in the Bible. And Dionysius will tell